Njegova ekscelencija, ambasador Amerike u Bosni i Hercegovini, gospodin Michael Murphy. Dobrodošli.
Thank you for having me. It's nice to be here.
Poštovani gledalci, ovo je prvi intervju za Face njegove ekscelencije. Prvi, ali u pravi moment. Samo nešto za uvod. Dakle, težak, vrlo opasan moment. Možda presudan za budućnost i opstanak ove zemlje. Ocijepljenje entiteta, prijetnje, proglašavanje nezavisnosti entiteta, srušeni suverenitet države Bosne i Hercegovine. Vaša ekscelencijo, Dodik je zabranio visokom predstavniku, i tako je rekao, da pređe entitetsku granicu. Pa je zatim zaprijetio Dodik hapšenjem visokom predstavniku. Dakle, je li pa vama to Dodik prijetio i Dodik uspija?
Well, the first thing I want to say, and frankly, it's to echo something that the High Representative said the other night. This isn't a game. Mr. Dodik seems to think it's a game, and we're not here to keep score. We're here to ensure that the Dayton Peace Agreement is in force and enforced. And that includes the authority of the High Representative as provided for in Annex 10, and of course, for a safe and secure environment as provided for with the presence of you four here. The United States strongly supports both institutions, and we expect all authorities in BIH to cooperate with those two institutions, including Mr. Dodik. And he's making a mistake if he believes he can have a confrontation with the international community and through the High Representative or through you four, and that we're going to acquiesce in his attempt to dismantle the Dayton Peace Agreement.
Radi na tome da razmontira Dejtonski sporazum. Jedan od najčudnijih momenta koji se dešava je nešto što je repriza iz prošlosti, a to je izlazak ljudi u znak podrške građana entiteta, u znak podrške Dodiku na entitetske linije, što je po Daytonu, odnosno na entitetske granice, što je po Dodiku. To je nevjerovatno da je predsjednica države, Željka Cvijanović, taj izlazak nazvala kao generalna proba. Znate, to je repriza od 1. marta 1992. godine, onog dana, od kada je, jel tako, počeo rat, to je bila generalna proba. Koliko vas to zabrinjava?
Well, look, first of all, I didn't see many people turn up for these protests at the inter-entity boundary line, which tells you something about whether or not the people of the RS have the same concerns in their lives that Mr. Dodik or Ms. Cvijanović claim they have, right? He's engaged, Mr. Dodik, on a very dangerous course. He is provoking a confrontation in Bosnia and Herzegovina with the international community. It's reckless. It's going to lead to the isolation, or worse, of Republika Srpska. Now, why is he doing that? He's essentially trying to avoid personal responsibility for his own actions, whether they involve violations of BIH law, whether they involve his mismanagement or failures in governance in Republika Srpska. How does he do this? He presents himself as an avatar for the Serb people, right? He thinks he's Prince Lazar, and he's asking everybody to come out to the fields of Kosovo Polje and fight for him and sacrifice for him. But he hasn't chosen a heavenly kingdom. He's very much chosen to enrich himself at the expense of the people he's calling out here in the earthly kingdom. So what do they get in all of this? Do they get good governance in Republika Srpska? No, they don't. They get their fundamental rights and freedoms taken away, like freedom of press, freedom of association, freedom of speech. They get debts. He's got more debt now than he did at the beginning of the year at higher interest rates, which isn't a very smart business move for a businessman. Where did the money go? What did they get from all of that? I go back to the turnout. Who came? People he paid to come, party people who had to be there. The people of Republika Srpska are not being defended by Milorad Dodik. They're being used by Milorad Dodik as a tool to protect himself from his own misdeeds and bad behavior. And they're not buying it.
Vaša ekscelencijo, Dodik, braneći sebe, uvlači u svoju odbranu i entitet i građane. Međutim, postoji jedan paradoks da on napada dio svog građanstva u entitetu, a to su sindikati koji najavljuju velike proteste, koji će sigurno biti masovni od izlaska Dodikovih pristalica, po znacima navoda, na entitetske linije. Dodik kaže da sada ti sindikati koji traže svoja prava, svoje pare, ovdje trebaju pare svakom građaninu Bosne i Hercegovine, da su u stvari instruisani od američke ambasade.
That's laughable and ridiculous. You know, as American diplomats, whether we're here in Banja Luka or Mostar or Sarajevo, we meet regularly with a cross-section of people and organizations throughout BIH, cultural leaders, journalists, political leaders, civil society leaders, private sector businesses, representatives of unions. We do that as part of our job. That's our job. We talk to these folks. We want to understand what their problems and challenges are, how they view the situation, so we can have a better understanding of what's happening here in Bosnia and Herzegovina. And we're not here to organize protests. He's got a problem, Mr. Dodik, in Republika Srpska. Some people are unhappy with his governance. He made some promises to them about what sort of salaries he would provide. He made promises about benefits to certain classes of people in Republika Srpska, and he's not delivering on those promises. So what is his natural reaction to that? He's got to find somebody to blame, somebody other than himself. So there needs to be a boogeyman in his story. And the boogeyman in his story is the international community, the United Kingdom, the United States, the High Representative. The problems are his own. And now he's being held accountable for them. And he doesn't like it very much.
Gospodine Murphy, to što je Dodik zabranio visokom predstavniku da uđe u entitet, to nije samo udarac u lice visokom predstavniku gospodinu Schmidtu. To je udarac i vama, Americi, velikim silama, onim ambasadama koje podržavaju visokog predstavnika. Imate li u planu ideja, da li je to rješenje, demonstracija sile ili sasvim nešto normalno, da vi lično odete sa Schmidtom ili sa delegacijom ambasadora u entitet u bilo koju instituciju?
Well, look, I want to start by saying that nothing Mr. Dodik says about the United States Embassy, about me or the United States, his insults, his crazy conspiracy theories, we don't take those seriously. I imagine most people don't take those seriously. They're so ridiculously far-fetched. And he is not doing the citizens of Republika Srpska any favors by putting on these performances every couple days where he makes lots of claims that are false about the Dayton Peace Agreement, false about the authorities of the High Representative, false about United States policy, or false about what he's doing in Republika Srpska. He's focused on his personal problems and trying to find a way to blame somebody else for those problems that he's created. That's what this is all about, and we're not going to be baited by him in this case. And to be frank, we're not going to be engaged in a series of back and forth insults like this. We're going to continue to focus on policy and advancing our objectives here, which is to protect the sovereignty, territorial integrity, and multi-ethnic character of BIH, and to help the country advance down the path of Euro-Atlantic integration. That's our policy, that's what the citizens want, and that's what we're going to do.
Kažete da ne želite da uđete u njegove igre.
That's right. Look, he can insult me or insult the United States all he wants. When we respond to something he has to say, we respond with facts, right? He makes a claim about some conspiracy theory involving unions or indictments or whatever. Why? Because he has a problem. He's either mismanaged something or he's in trouble with the law. That's the result of his own actions. He's an individual. He needs to accept responsibility for what he's done, and he's trying to use the people of Republika Srpska to protect him. he's not working on their behalf at all.
Ja sam, pravo da vam kažem, veoma zabrinut. Vidim da su građani u oba entiteta, u cijeloj državi, veoma zabrinuti. Tenzije, svaki dan, sve je neizvjesnije. Mladi nalaze rješenja, nažalost, u masovnom odlasku iz ove zemlje. Stalno smo svaki dan u nekom iščekivanju. Entitetska linija, hoće li biti rata, šta će se desiti. Ljudi su jednostavno isprepadani to. Dakle, bit ću direktan, šta se dešava, šta Amerika zna, malo opustim, šta CIA zna i još direktniji. Da li se entitet RS već na ovaj i neki način odcijepio?
No, look, it has not seceded. Look, I understand why people are concerned about the future of Bosnia and Herzegovina, anxious about the country and the trajectory it's on, because there are problems here. There's no denying that there are problems here. The actions that Mr. Dodik and other RS authorities are taking are serious. They are attacks on the Dayton Peace Agreement. They're attacks on the state. The rhetoric we're hearing from politicians in this country, much of it hate-filled, is serious and dangerous and tears at the social fabric of this country. Corruption is rampant in this country, in both entities, right? And that threatens the country's democracy and its economy. The reforms that are required to make changes in Bosnia and Herzegovina's trajectory aren't happening at the pace which we would all like, or with the frequency that we all need. So I understand why people are concerned, and I can't fault them for being concerned. In fact, for any citizen of any country to be concerned about the country's future is healthy. It reflects a larger commitment to trying to make things better. So what are we doing about it? My team wakes up every morning and we go to work trying to address some of these challenges. We are working hard to tackle some of the challenges posed by corruption. We're working hard to support the institutions of Bosnia and Herzegovina, like the armed forces of BIH, for example. We're working hard to support civil society and independent media, institutions that are required to create a robust civic space and to hold leaders and politicians accountable for their actions. We're working to try to create conditions that would improve the business climate and create job opportunities, not just for people, but for their children and grandchildren, so that they stay here in BIH and build a future for themselves near their loved ones. Is it easy? Absolutely not. It's hard. Change anywhere is hard, but it's particularly hard here, given the political environment you described and I described. But at heart, I'm an optimist in the sense that I believe in the possibilities that exist, but I have to be a realist about the challenges that are in front of us. And we're optimistic about our goals and what we're trying to accomplish here, about the future of BIH inside Euro-Atlantic institutions, but we're realistic about how tough a slog it's going to be to get there. And the last point I want to make in connection with that is an important one. The United States has been with Bosnia and Herzegovina for 30 years. We are your strongest and most reliable partner and friend. That's not going to change, and it's reflected in the investments that we are making in this country, many of which we've announced over the last year or so, like the additional millions of dollars we're providing to the armed forces of BIH. Some of the programs we're doing to grow the economy through tourism, for example, or the IT sector. That's going to continue because we care about BIH. It's in our interest to care about BIH, and it's consistent with our values to care about BIH.
Kada ja kažem da sam zabrinut, između ostalog mislim i na to da je preksinoć UN izdao saopštenje da su zabrinuti za opstanak države, a veliku priču o Bosni i Hercegovini također sa velikom brigom i profesionalno, maksimalno je emitovao veliki BBC preksinoć. Iz oba saopštenja se to da naslutiti da li bi rat mogao da se nastavi. Mislite da smo na toj ivici?
No, I do not think you're on the brink of a war in Bosnia and Herzegovina. But I do think you have serious political problems. And I do think the path that Mr. Dodik is going down is dangerous. not just for the country of BiH, obviously, but for the Republika Srpska itself. It's a mistake. And he is attempting to use the people of Republika Srpska as a shield. As I said earlier, he claims to be defending them, but he's taking away their fundamental rights and freedoms. He's mismanaging the economy. He's failing to address their everyday needs, higher energy prices, other forms of inflation, the flight of jobs. Instead, he's engaged in a confrontation that isn't going to end well for him and those who support him if it continues. And the United States has been clear about where we stand on these issues. If you're going to challenge the Dayton Peace Agreement, if you're going to undermine the state, then we're going to act. We're going to act to protect the territorial integrity, the sovereignty, and multi-ethnic character of the state, and we will take actions to hold individuals accountable.
To je ključno pitanje, Vaša ekscelencijo, da ćete, upravo ste izgovorili, štititi Dejtonski mirovni sporazum. Ja vam kao novinar i osoba koja se dobro razumije u Dejtonski mirovni sporazum mogu reći novinarsko je mišljenje. Dejtonski mirovni sporazum je mrtav. I sada ga jedna strana šminka, dotjeruje, jedna strana od njega uzima šta joj treba i treća strana recimo prijeti da po Dejtonu, napustit će državne institucije, rasformirat će oružane snage koje su formirane nakon Dejtona. Šta ako se to zaista desi? Zaista se desi da očigledno bude da je Dejtonski mirovni sporazum mrtav, da se povlače ljudi iz entiteta, funkcioneri i službenici iz državnih institucija i vojnici iz entiteta iz oružanih snaga Bosne i Hercegovine.
Well, look, I don't think the Dayton Peace Agreement is dead. I think it's premature to make that claim. The Dayton Peace Agreement has its flaws, certainly. It needs to be changed and amended, particularly in line with the ECHR rulings. My government has been engaged in a series of efforts over many years to try to do that, to try to address that challenge, to make it a more effective and efficient agreement, and to help advance the country's path towards Euro-Atlantic integration. We haven't had the success we would like because party leaders, when they come to these negotiations and engagements, they don't engage in good faith, or they don't even show up at all, or they're focused on their own narrow political self-interests. And in order for these kinds of amendments to occur and changes to take place, they're going to have to sit down. We're still willing to help, but to engage in good faith. And there's going to have to be some trust building going on here. We can't impose the changes from the outside. Even the High Representative can't impose the changes from outside. That's not the way the Dayton Agreement works. With regards to the other part of your question, I want to underscore something I said earlier. The United States is not going to stand idly by while Mr. Dodik or anyone else rips up the Dayton Peace Agreement and leads this country into conflict. Neither do I think the High Representative or other members of the international community are going to do that. There'll be a reaction and there'll be consequences for those individuals who go down that path.
Kojih reakcija i kakvih posljedica?
Well, for example, sanctions. We've used our sanctions tool. EUFOR is stronger and more capable this year than it was a year ago. The High Representative has bond powers. So there are a number of things that you can do to ensure that individuals pay consequences for their actions.
Znate da se Dodik ismijava američkim sankcijama i protiv njega i protiv njegovih prvih saradnika, da je to njemu smiješno i oni se ismijavaju, čak Izetbegović se ismijava tim sankcijama i kao ne vidimo mi koji je to rezultat, pa i oni ne vide koja je šteta po njih ako im Amerika uvela sankcije, ako su na crnim listama.
Well, you need to make a distinction between the impact of the sanctions, which are clear, right, versus what they say the impact of the sanctions are, right? Of course they don't like the sanctions. They don't like being held accountable for their actions or for their behavior. The political leaders in this country too often seek to escape any responsibility for corruption, for anti-Dayton activities, for anti-democratic activities, right? And so they naturally claim, oh, well, it doesn't affect me. But let me tell you, in private, they're all trying to get off the so-called blacklist. So I'm confident the sanctions are having the impact we want them to have, and we'll continue to use that tool if we feel we need to.
Samo još ovo o Daytonu. Zabilježio sam jednu vašu izjavu, a upravo ste govorili o mogućim izmjenama Daytona. Aprilski paket najbolje rješenje, to je vaša izjava. Da li nešto najavljujete?
I'm not announcing something, but I am making an observation. You know, the April package was an opportunity for Bosnia and Herzegovina to move beyond the past and to move towards a brighter future for the people of this country, right? What did it contain? A single, indirectly elected president, a House of Peoples that was VNI only, a strengthened Council of Ministers, a European Union supremacy clause that it would have given the state the ability to do the things it needs to do to advance towards European integration. Those are all positive changes. They were positive proposals then, and they're positive proposals now. But the politicians at the time were too short-sighted. They either had their own narrow interests in mind, or they wanted to make the perfect the enemy of the good. And now I hear politicians say all the time, God, you know, we should have passed those. We should have adopted those. We made a mistake. I was very dismayed yesterday or a couple days ago to see Stranka Zabi make an announcement that they were so proud of having sabotaged the April package. They shouldn't be proud of that. They should be ashamed of it. It was a lost opportunity for Bosnia and Herzegovina. You don't get those kind of opportunities all that often in life, and if you don't seize them, you're going to regret it, and that's what's happened here. Now, does that mean change is impossible? No. Is it super hard, like I said earlier? Certainly. We're prepared to help the party leaders move towards a stronger and more effective set of constitutional governance here in BIH, but it's still going to require the party leaders to participate in negotiations in good faith. They're going to have to show up. You can't sit on the sidelines and just throw rocks into the pool as if you're contributing to the process, because you're not. And you have to rise above your own narrow personal interests. They haven't been prepared to do that. We can't impose a solution. The High Representative can't impose a solution. But some of the ideas in the April package that were relevant back then are still very relevant today.
Kada govorite o sankcijama Dodiku, možda bi najbolje bilo da ga zaista kazni država koju on ruši, dakle Bosna i Hercegovina. Znači, mislim na proces protiv Dodika, optužnicu koja je jedva podiglo tužilaštvo i sada sud prihvata. Međutim, izlazi jedan detalj iz te optužnice. Tužilaštvo je predložilo, upravo o čemu govorimo, zabranu političkog djelovanja Dodika, dakle smjenu s mjesta predsjednika entiteta. Sad imamo tu više problema. Prvo, to će dugo trajati, to na dugu štapu. Sud, svi stručnjaci to kažu, suđenje će trajati, vječnost. Dodik najavljuje, suđenja neće ni biti ili će ga u Banja Luci biti. To će sigurno dugo trajati. A ako to bude trajalo, i naš problem će trajati. Ima li ipak međunarodna zajednica neku hitnu intervenciju ili će pratiti sud i tužilaštvo?
Well, a couple things I want to say in response to your question. The first is, you're absolutely right. It is always best if local institutions hold political leaders, any political leaders, accountable for their misdeeds, whatever those misdeeds may be. So I agree with you. I think that's right. One of the challenges here is empowering and encouraging and helping local institutions to do that. And that's something the international community has been focused on. That's not changing fast enough either, but there is some change. Look at some of the cases that have been brought forth recently, you know, in Bosnia and Herzegovina, based on Skajanan, for example. That's a positive development in the context of rule of law. Now, second point I want to make. Obviously, rule of law is foundational to any democracy. Without it, you can't have a democracy. And what that means is the laws of the country apply to everyone, even presidents. Presidents of entities, presidents of political parties, presidents of the country as a whole, just as they apply to average citizens. I'm not going to comment on the specifics about the indictment or speculate about how long the trial will take or how it will turn out. But what's important now is the process needs to be allowed to play out as it's supposed to within the laws and regulations of BIH and not subject to any political pressure from anybody, anywhere.
Ključna priča je sada o OHR-u i o njegovim potezima, odnosno o nametanju zakona ili sankcija. Dakle, visoki predstavnik prije 2 dana kaže stranci u Ustavnom sudu Bosne i Hercegovine moraju da ostanu, inače će država nestati. Pretpostavljam da je to i odgovor i stav Amerike. I drugo je zakon o državnoj imovini. Da li će ga visoki predstavnik morati nametnuti jer neće proći u državnom parlamentu. A Dodik istovremeno odgovara, ako se nametne zakon, automatski slijedi odcepljenje. To je taj dramatični moment i to će se dešavati ovih dana. Kakav je stav Amerike, vaš stav?
Well, let me start with the Constitutional Court, the first part of your question. And if you're asking, does the United States believe the international judges still have a role to play here and belong on the Constitutional Court? The answer is yes, we do. Second point I would make in connection with that, we're not going to support attempts that are supported by Mr. Dodik and by Mr. Čović to turn this court into an ethnic institution. That's not what it is. That's not what it should be. Final point I'll make about the Constitutional Court is no one should be subjected to Mr. Dodik's blackmail, not the BIH citizens, not the judicial institutions, not the other political parties in this country, not the international community, which is what he's attempting to do. He denies it, but that's exactly what he's doing. And we're not going to submit to that either. We're going to defend the institutions of this country, and that includes the Constitutional Court. With regards to state property, we've been very clear about that issue. This issue is straightforward, despite Mr. Dodik's attempts to muddy the waters. State property belongs to, wait for it, the state. This is an issue that was dealt with by all the former republics of Yugoslavia. You can look to Croatia and Serbia and Montenegro and North Macedonia, and you can see that they went through these very same processes. And those laws, those international rules apply to Bosnia and Herzegovina as well. So the state property belongs to the state. Now, does that mean an entity or a canton or a municipality can't make use of that property? There can't be an arrangement agreed to between the state and those other potential partners on state property? Of course not. That's perfectly reasonable and something that we all do in our own countries. And it's something that has occurred in, again, the former republics of Yugoslavia. Dodik is trying to scare people. That's what he's trying to do. And he's misleading them with what are a lot of legal fantasies about property. It's not going to work. It's not going to change fundamental facts or the views of the members of the international community.
Gospodine Murphy, ja sam prilično siguran da Dodik neće stati u svom naumu, da će nastaviti ovako, pogotovo kada je u pitanju državna imovina, i najavio odcepljenje ako državna imovina zakon bude nametnut i to. Dakle, čak govorimo i o samom terminu državne imovine. Ako ne bude onako kako on hoće i želi i traži, a to je da to bude entitetska imovina. Kako bi to objasnio? Njemu će dobro doći takva formulacija u eventualnom nametnutom zakonu o državnoj imovini. Da je državna, a onda će se vidjeti šta kome zaista pripada kantonu, entitetu, opštini, gradu.
State property belongs to the state, right? That's straightforward. You know, that's a settled issue. Let me take defense property. There's prospective and non-prospective defense property, both pieces of state property. The Ministry of Defense has reached some conclusions about what property it needs to keep, prospective property, and what property it doesn't need. It's up to the ministry, in the context of a state property law at the state level, to decide then what to do with that property. It can dispose of the property if it doesn't need it. It could allow another organization, governmental organization, like an entity, like a canton, like a municipality, to use that property. But the fundamental principle is the same. The property belongs to the state. So how it's disposed of after the fact is a state-level decision in negotiation with some prospective user. Mr. Dodik is arguing that all the property belongs to him. That's not true.
Znate, koliko ima analitičara, koliko ima političara koji svu ovu dramu koja se dešava oko državne imovine, oko Ustavnog suda, oko granice ili entitetske linije, oko zabrane ulaska visokog predstavnika, da je svi tumače u stvari kao igru. I da li vas vrijeđa kada to čitate i kada čujete gdje kažu sve ovo igra nekog međunarodnog lobija, nekih velikih država, da uprostim, igra Dodika, Amerike, OHR-a, sva ova drama, samo da bi se skrenula pažnja sa neke suštine, a to je sudbina države i njena imovina. Jeste li u igri? Je li iko u igri ovdje? Ima neki lobby? Ima neki međunarodni lobby? Postoji li neki politički, kako bi rekao, lobistički kartel koji odlučuje o našoj zemlji?
Let me start with, the United States of America doesn't play games, right? We pursue our interests and we pursue our policies. And our policy here is very clear. We strongly support the sovereignty, territorial integrity, and multi-ethnic character of BIH. We want to, in that context, see it integrated into Euro-Atlantic structures, and we work towards that every day, as I said earlier. And that requires, among other things, efficient, accountable, and effective governance at all levels here, and we work towards that as well. We're not playing games. And one of the things that I would caution those people who think we're playing games is you're going to miscalculate and you're not going to like the consequences.
Imena. Koji ljudi?
Names of whom?
Ovih ljudi o kojima govorite, koji će se preračunati.
Look, I think we've been pretty clear in our public statements about those actors, like Mr. Dodik, who is engaged in actions that are anti-Dayton and designed to undermine the state. And we have said, clearly, we're going to hold those people accountable. So, they decided to play a game in Parliament, in the RSNA, in June. What did the United States do? We sanctioned 4 individuals who decided to play games, right? And if they continue, we'll do it again. We've been quite clear about this. We do it at a time of our choosing, when we feel it's appropriate, but we haven't been bashful in the last 18 months of using that tool. And we haven't just done it in Republika Srpska either. We've sanctioned politicians from other political parties as well. You can ask Mr. Chavra. You can ask Mr. Novalic about that. If you want to play games and you think we're not serious, those are the consequences.
Citiram vas. Amerika neće šutiti o korumpiranim političarima u Bosni i Hercegovini. Dakle, to su ti imena. Već ste neki kaznili. Da li to znači da druge pratite, to je da imate spisak imena?
Well, you know, we don't have a list of names in the way you've just described it, no. But if people are engaged in activities that are anti-Dayton or corrupt, and we have a very rigorous sanctions process that we go through. This is a deliberative process. We're not flippant about it. Then we act.
Šutiti o korumpiranim političarima. To je što narod i očekuje. Upravo to, imena, ko su. Znaju da, narod zna da ko krade i koliko krade. Zato pitam.
Well, if you want to look at the names of people who we believe are corrupt, you can look at our sanctions list, right? Right there. If you want the names of political leaders or other business or state-owned enterprise leaders that may be corrupt, take a look at the names that are documented in the very, very thorough and impressive investigative reporting we see in this country. I'm not going to preview a U.S. sanction action. That's not appropriate. That's not how we work. But if you're corrupt in this country and we decide we need to act, don't be surprised to wake up and find in one morning that you've been sanctioned.
Upravo sam vas to pitao, zato što je bilo veliko iznenađenje da su se na toj listi našli i bošnjački političari iz SDA. Zato vas pitam ovo, ja to o tome govorim 33 godine, da je Amerika najjači saveznik ove zemlje, da bez obzira na promjene politike Amerike prema Bosni i Hercegovini, da bez obzira na neke pauze u politici Amerike prema Bosni i Hercegovini, jer postoje druga žarišta, ne smijemo da zaboravimo na Ameriku. I čak bi se usudio da kažem da sve karte moramo da bacimo na Ameriku. Uostalom, vaša država je zaustavila rat. To pokazuje vašu snagu. Daytonom nisam zadovoljan kao novinar i mislim na uzrok svih ovih problema. Ali većina ovoga što ja kažem sada je govorila Stranka demokratske akcije, koja sada govori upravo protiv Amerike. Zašto?
You know, I want to make a couple observations. We've often had a very good working relationship with the membership and some of the political leaders from SDA. SDA played an important role in this country's history, and we recognize that, all right? And we're still prepared to work with politicians from SDA that are prepared to engage in the type of change and support the type of change here that's necessary to advance the country's Euro-Atlantic future and implement the types of reforms that involves, whether that's anti-corruption initiatives, improving the economy, strengthening the country's democracy, things like that. I read the interview that Mr. Izetbegovic gave to Al Arabiya the other day, and I was struck by something in that interview. He talked about inheriting his party, like he owned it. Last time I checked, he wasn't a king and he's not a sultan. You don't inherit a party. You're elected by the rank and file membership to lead a party on their behalf. Ali Izetbegovic understood that. Suleiman Tihic understood that. I'm not sure Bakir Izetbegovic understands that, and I'm pretty certain that may be why he's not sitting in the presidency building right now and Mr. Bacirovic is.
Ja vjerujem da je on to iskreno rekao. Da on zaista misli da je to nasljeđe od njegovog oca i to je javno rekao i to nije prvi put da kaže i da je to porodična stranka. Privatna stranka. Pa ko želi u nju pod tom parolom da je to porodična, interesna stranka na čijem čelu su njih dvoje, bračni par, onda neka izvoli. Ko ne želi, ne mora u SDA.
If it is a family party working only on behalf of the interests of that family, it's not helping BIH. It's not pro-Bosnian. It's not even pro-Bosniak. That would make it pro-Bakir. That's not what the country needs. That's not what SDA was. We know because we've had strong partnerships with former SDA leaders before. I worked closely in my first tour here with Mr. Tihic, for example.
Kako rekli ste da biste sarađivali sa Strankom demokratske akcije u nekom kontekstu? Kako ćete sarađivati kada i u tom intervju i u intervjuima prije, odnosno od kako je SDA izgubila vlast, vas uglavnom optužuju da je Amerika i da je čitav zapad protiv muslimana, da Amerika ovdje utiče samo na muslimanske političke krugove, dakle na jednu generalnu osudu Zapada i Amerike u odnosu prema bosanskim muslimanima, to je Bošnjacima?
Well, first of all, that is patently false and untrue. Look, we're not pro any particular party. We want to work with partners who are prepared to take the country forward. We're not anti-Bosniak, we're not anti-Serb, we're not anti-Croat. SDA finds itself out of power, right? SNSD has been out of power, HTZ-BIH has been out of power. Their problem is they're out of power and they're looking for someone to blame for that. And I just spoke earlier about, you know, and you asked me about it, if the party is designed to advance a single individual or family, or the leadership thinks they've inherited the party and can do with it what they wish without regard to the interests of the members of that party, right? Who, when I speak to them, are interested in reform, Euro-Atlantic integration, jobs and economic growth for themselves, their children and their grandchildren. That's fantastic, and we can work with that too, and we have worked with them in the past on those types of issues. But they're going to need to focus on those types of issues. And the other thing I'll say is, I don't really believe that people in Bosnia and Herzegovina, when they look at the record of the United States, not just stopping the war, as you put it, but also the support we've given to the country over the last 30 years, that we're the strongest partner and friend to Bosnia and Herzegovina, I don't think they really believe that stuff. They're too smart.
To je počelo u toku izborne kampanje. Ja znam kako se to desilo, provjerio sam. Dakle, jedna obavještajna služba iz regiona, iz susjedstva, je smislila parolu SDA ili SAD. Razumijete tu igru slovima, da skraćenica Sjedinjenih Američkih Država je na našem jeziku gotovo slična kao skraćenici Stranke demokratske akcije. SDA ili SAD. Tu obavještajnu podmetačinu je preuzeo njihov obavještajni bot, koji je također bot te stranke. I to je okej u tim obavještajnim krugovima. Ali je prosto nevjerovatno da je Stranka demokratske akcije uzela tu parolu i od nje napravila svoju politiku. Politiku jedne stranke protiv jedne države koja je toliko učinila za ovu zemlju. Kako ocenjujete to? Je li to namjerno, je li to svjesno? Je li to po nagovoru Rusije? Je li to po nagovoru Kine? Jer imamo ovdje u studiju zvaničnike te stranke koji su kazali vrlo jasno u uživo programu zašto da ne? Kakav zapad? Možemo se okrenuti Rusiji i Kini već sutra ujutru.
Well, look, I'm going to tell you something, and I think you already know this. Bosnia and Herzegovina has been, for a long time, for thousands of years, part of the European and now transatlantic family of nations. The people of this country look towards integration into Euro-Atlantic institutions, whether the EU or NATO. When they travel, that's where they go. When they're looking for business opportunities, that's where they go. You can have friends everywhere in the world, but that's a different question than where do you want your future to lie. And I think if Bakir Izetbegovic is going to try to sell the people of this country on our future is with Russia, he's going to lose the next election in an even worse way than he lost the previous election. It's political malpractice. I don't think that's what the people here want.
Biću još direktniji. Da li biste odmah uspostavili bolje odnose sa Strankom demokratske akcije ako bi na sljedećem kongresu sada u oktobru ta stranka izabrala novog predsjednika?
Well, I'm not going to provide advice or guidance to the members of SDA about who they want to choose as their leader. That's up to them to decide. Right? But what I can say is that the United States has been and is and will be the greatest friend of Bosnia and Herzegovina, your strongest partner. And you see it in the investments that we make here and in the policies we implement here. But we are going to hold individual leaders accountable for their actions, whether that's corruption or anti-Dayton activity. And that's not going to change.
Biću kratak u finišu ove emisije, nema više vremena. Trojka me zanima, dakle vlast trojke, politika, rad, vlast trojke. Kako ju ocjenjujete? Tim prije što svi političari iz opozicije, najviše iz SDA, kažu da je u stvari ovo Murphyjeva vlast, da je glavni operativac osoba koja je formirala vlast na svim nivoima i to američki uradila onako bez kompromisa upravo ambasador Murphy, to jest vi. Kako ocjenjujete rad trojke do sada? Šta rade, kako rade?
Well, let me start by saying the United States government doesn't pick political leaders. We don't form governments, we don't make coalitions. That is the responsibility of the political leaders and the parties themselves. That's the first point I want to make. The second point I want to make is we're only a few months into the government, right? So I'm not prepared to give it a final grade yet. I don't think that's appropriate either. That'll come in the elections in a few years from now. But I will say this, they've made some progress. They've cleaned up some of the mess that they inherited. I mean, there is a government for the first time in 5 years after an election. That's not unimportant. They've passed some important energy laws. They've addressed the challenge of civilian victims of war. And they're working on operationalizing the 2014 law on anti-corruption in the Federation. Those are all good things. Is it happening fast enough? No, it's not. They need to be more efficient and more effective. But they also need to be given a chance. So I'm not going to give them a grade one way or the other, but I will say this, the United States is prepared to work with them and other parties who want to make a difference and work on behalf of the constituents that they represent to improve the democracy here, to improve the economy here, and to make the country more secure.
Opozicija je jedva dočekala vaše pismo koje je potpuno otvoreno javno bilo, koje ste uputili premijeru entitetske vlade Federacije Nikšiću, vi i ambasador Sattler, gdje tražite između ostaloga, to u centru pažnje, da se bosansko-hercegovački aerodromi, neki potpuno neuspješni, a neki vrlo uspješni kao sarajevski, daju pod koncesiju. Kome? Zašto? Zašto ste to pismo napisali? Šta je pozadina tog pisma? Neki biznis, privreda, razvoj, ulaganje, investicija i nešto strateški, nešto vojno ili nešto politički?
Well, let me start by saying the United States, whether here or in any other country around the world, often communicates in writing with governments. So there's nothing unique about that. I know Mr. Novalic claimed that he would never get a letter from the United States. Well, he got several letters from the United States. So that's not exactly true. When we have important points to make that are complicated or elaborate, we often choose to communicate in writing. Second point I'd make about the letter was about a lot of different things. People are focused on the airport, and I'll come to that. But we also raised, for example, the issues associated with countering terrorist finance and anti-money laundering. And why did we raise that? Because we don't want to see BIH blacklisted. And there's some work that needs to be done at the Federation level to address that. Most of the work needs to be done at the state level, but some of it needs to be done at the Federation level. We emphasized anti-corruption. And we talked about the importance of implementing the 2014 law. And the Prime Minister has communicated to me and to others in the international community that's one of his goals. He said it in public as well. We wanted to indicate that we support that. And then there's a whole series of other issues that have been raised in the back end of the letter about economic issues and the need to improve the business climate, to move to e-governance, which will make it easier to get a permit and easier to combat corruption. So I guess in one respect, we stand accused of being opposed to corruption, wanting to see Bosnia and Herzegovina retain good standing in the international banking community, and we want to see the economy grow. I guess we're guilty of that, but that's okay. I can live with being guilty for wanting to see those things for the people of Bosnia and Herzegovina. With regards to the airport, the Sarajevo airport has certainly had some successes. I don't disagree with that. But there's also been some tremendous regional successes in Tirana, for example, and elsewhere in the Western Balkans, where concessions have helped grow passenger levels even higher. And right now they're higher than Sarajevo. And this is important to Sarajevo. Why? And not just Sarajevo, to all of BIH, because that brings in tourists. That brings in people who are going to spend money and create jobs in doing so in Bosnia and Herzegovina. I told you earlier in the interview that one of the things we've focused some of our assistance on is growing the tourism sector here. It's private sector led, which is a good thing. It's entrepreneurial, which taps into the wonderful talent that you have in this country, and you have so many talented people. And we're seeing changes in adventure tourism, in the wine industry, here in Sarajevo as well. And it can be better, stronger, and more prosperous if the airport were better run. And a concession is one way of doing that. Not the only way, but one way of doing that. So that's why we raised the issue in the letter to the government.
Govorite o biznisu, da je to biznis. Za kraj dva pitanja, tiču se i mene i vas i naših zemalja. Dakle, u 2 godišnja izvještaja vlada Sjedinjenih Američkih Država, State Department, pominje novinarstvo, slobodu novinarstva u našoj zemlji i napade na novinare. U ta 2 primjera smo u prvom planu mi, Face televizija, i nažalost moje ime i prezime i moja porodica. Ja sam zahvalan na tome, jer to smatram jednim činom ipak zaštite. Amerika, lično državni sekretar govori o ovoj televiziji, o napadima na mene, na moju porodicu i tako dalje. Ja to uvijek prevodim kao napade na sve nas novinare koji nešto pričamo. Međutim, i pored toga svega, ti napadi se nastavljaju i fizički, verbalni, preko društvenih mreža, ali i vrlo direktne prijetnje i vrlo direktni činovi, tako da kažem. Evo, neki dan, nikada tamo nisam imao problema u Hercegovini gdje suštinski živim, ovdje radim napad tajkunske porodice na mene i na moju porodicu. Šta tu može da bude efikasnije da bi se novinari koji su slobodni u Bosni i Hercegovini, ne mislim samo na nas, zaštitili, odbranili i da nam se da neka garancija od ipak Amerike. Doslovce bit ću direktan. Ne znam ko bi nas drugi mogao da zaštiti.
Well, let me start by saying the United States strongly condemns the most recent action, the attack you just described on you. We have condemned attacks on journalists, not just yourself, but in other parts of Bosnia and Herzegovina as well. We have mentioned some of those in our annual human rights report, including the incidents you identified relating to you and your program. Look, we're strong believers in the United States in freedom of press and freedom of speech. I'm a personal believer in both those things as well. So we're going to continue to speak out against it. But it's not the only thing we're going to do. We're going to continue to support an independent media and a strong civil society to hold individuals accountable for their behavior. We've established a new defense fund to help individual journalists who are being attacked through nuisance lawsuits, right? Because it's not just physical threats or verbal threats that are a problem. There are other ways, economic intimidation coming at an independent media. And this new fund is going to help protect some of those journalists when they encounter that. And we're going to speak out against the egregious types of things we're seeing in the Republika Srpska, where, as I mentioned earlier, Mr. Dodik is putting in place legislation designed to take away the fundamental freedoms of the citizens of Republika Srpska, fundamental freedoms that are guaranteed in the constitutions in this country: freedom of press, freedom of media, freedom of assembly. And we're going to continue to speak out about that. So our support for those principles and the support we have for the media community here and for the civil society community here is enduring. In fact, as I said, we're increasing that support because we recognize the seriousness of the situation.
Za kraj, još sam malo ličan u ovom pitanju. Kao novinar sam naučio na to, podnosim to decenijama, ali tu problem je tako porodice, radnika, mladi ekipa koji su pod strašnim pritiskom. Pa moram da njih štitim prvo. Pa ću biti za kraj malo s nekim ličnim pitanjem prema vama. Kako vi lično podnosite kada ovdje radite, a nazivaju vas pa sve više i sa gotovo sve 3 strane, ali najviše sa Dodikove strane, i kada vam daju tako ružne epitete, najblažiji kauboj, šta će on ovdje, neznalica, gospodinu Šmitu da je fašista, mislim, užasno. Kako vi to podnosite? Mislim, vi ste diplomata, uvježbani ste, ja kao novinar, da to podnosimo do neke mjere, ali sva ima svoju mjeru.
Well, mainly I ignore it because, you know, it's silly, right? The second thing is it tells me I'm doing my job, right? When an ethno-nationalist political leader is unhappy because we're talking about corruption or free and fair elections or defending the Dayton Agreement or helping the state of Bosnia-Herzegovina, and they get angry and all they have to offer is insults, there's no substance to Mr. Dodik, and there's no substance to many of these other critics. That's their problem, not mine. We have a substantive agenda here in Bosnia and Herzegovina. And I repeat it often, and I'm going to do it again, to support the territorial integrity, sovereignty, and multi-ethnic character of this country, and to see it integrated into Euro-Atlantic institutions. It's what we get up and focus on every day. We are determined, and it's hard work, but we're going to keep doing it. And they can keep calling me bad names if they want, but we're going to keep doing it. We are your strongest friend and partner, and we have been for the last 30 years, and we're going to continue to be for the next 30 years.
Bili ste, naš je prvi intervju, bili ste nevjerovatno otvoreni za jednog diplomata. To su mi najteži intervju, da vam pravo kažem, sa diplomatama, dok otpakujem šta hoće da kažu, a oni vrlo pakuju. Hvala vam što ste bilo tako. Već ste završili emisiju na neki način, ali hoću da poentiram, jer već ste nekoliko puta u emisiji sami, bez mog pitanja, kazali šta je politika Amerike prema Bosni i Hercegovini. Ali s obzirom na sve veći broj političkih sumnji, pa te sumnje uđu i u građane, da li je baš Amerika tako iskrena prema Bosni i Hercegovini? Da li Amerika učestvuje u stvaranju velike Srbije, velike Hrvatske, velike Albanije ovdje, u smislu, ako ne formalnom podjele Bosne i Hercegovine, onda barem u smislu stvaranja interesnih zona. Zato hoću da završimo razgovor ovim pitanjem, a da mi odgovorite najdirektnije kako ste do sada. A pitanje je vrlo jednostavno, a da budete otvoreni, iskreni, jasni, bez lažnih nadi. Šta je politika Amerike prema Bosni i Hercegovini? I šta slijedi?
The United States supports the territorial integrity, sovereignty, and multi-ethnic character of this country. We want to see this country integrated into Euro-Atlantic institutions, the EU and NATO. And our engagement here, whether it's our security engagement, our diplomatic engagement, or our development engagement, is all focused on that. That's what we do. We're going to defend the Dayton Constitution. We are going to defend the state of BIH, and we're going to speak out when we're unhappy or we see actions that are at odds with those objectives, those interests. The nice thing for me here in Bosnia-Herzegovina, in addition to loving the people and loving the country, is that when I tell you I have to get up every morning and worry about how do we change BIH for the better, how do we reform the economy, how do we stop corruption, how do we move the country towards Europe, that's what the people of this country want. That's what the people of this country want. What's needed is for the politicians to focus on what the people of this country want and to actively, earnestly, and sincerely work towards it. And we're going to put pressure on them to do so. That's our interests. That's the interests of the people of this country. That's our policy.
Hvala vam, Vaša ekscelencijo.
It's my pleasure. I really enjoyed it.
Moja također. Michael Murphy, njegova ekscelencija, ambasador Amerike u Bosni i Hercegovini. Nadam se da ste zadovoljni, ako ničim drugim, barem otvorenošću. To je izuzetno rijetko u programu kada razgovaramo sa diplomatama, bez da ružimo ostale. CD za par minutica.